Hi. Today we will explain the storyline of a movie titled Puppetman, released in 2023. Okay, let's get right to the story. A woman is preparing dinner for her family, unaware that her husband, David, will return home early. However, David seems unusual that day. He takes a knife from the kitchen and tells his wife to run. Before she can react, David stabs her to death. This tragedy leads David to be dubbed Puppetman, the killer. Years later, the story of Puppetman resurfaced on a podcast, which was listened to by two friends, Charlie and Michal. Michal is David's daughter, who is now in college. The host mentioned that the police found Michal hidden inside a wardrobe, and she had been there for a long time. After listening to the podcast, Michal unconsciously scratched her hand until it bled. A habit she had when anxious, Charlie asked her to stop and inquired about her feelings. Michal admitted it was very difficult to open up about the traumatic experience to Charlie, but she just wanted to forget about it. Charlie felt it was the right decision, considering David was going to be executed. Charlie added that she was willing to accompany Michal if she ever wanted to visit David. Charlie also searched for more information about David's motive for the murder. According to Charlie's online research, there was an article mentioning that the police found a book about devil worship in David's room, which might be related. However, Michal thought it was ridiculous and chose to ignore the idea. However, in class, Michal seemed lost in thought. Even when Charlie told her about her plan to have a secret party on the roof of the campus building, Michal didn't really listen. Michal then excused herself to the bathroom to calm down. Because memories from her childhood flashing through her mind, she heard someone say, "Hello." It was Charlie, who wanted to make sure Michal was okay. Charlie asked them to leave immediately because Danny, Michal's boyfriend, was waiting. But when they stepped out of the bathroom, the mirror suddenly fogged up and revealed the word, "Hello." Late at night, while Michal was asleep, Charlie read an article about the latest developments in David's case, which reported that he would receive a lethal injection this week. She checked on Michal to make sure she wasn't awake, and at that moment, Michal was sleepwalking. She only came to her senses when Charlie woke her up and told her to go back to her room. On the wall, there were 3 red lines from Michal's wrist, which she usually scratched. In a daze, Michal returned to her room. Charlie admitted that this wasn't the first time she had sleepwalked, but she didn't dare tell Michal. The next day, Michal and her friends, Charlie, Joe, Danny, and Glenn, bought alcohol for a gathering on the roof. However, Charlie decided to split and join them later. Michal and the others returned to the dormitory, while Charlie went to a house. Meanwhile, Danny walked Michal to the front of the dormitory. While waiting for Charlie to return, Michal heard several notifications from Charlie's laptop. Out of curiosity, Michal glanced at the messages. Then her attention was fixed on a folder titled Roomy, which contained videos of Charlie recording Michal sleepwalking. She gasped when she saw herself waking up and drawing 3 lines like she did last night. That night, it was time for their gathering. After everyone had arrived, they toasted to their hopes and dreams. The event proceeded casually, with Charlie suddenly kissing Glenn for fun. She then told Michal and Danny to do the same, but Danny politely refused. Glenn urged Danny to do it to cheer Michal up, who he thought had a lot of problems. Without feeling guilty, Glenn mentioned Puppetman and his habit of walking in his sleep. Hearing this, Michal was startled and felt betrayed. Charlie promised her that the secret wouldn't get out, but Charlie claimed she only wanted to help. Feeling angry, Michal heads for the exit. Charlie tries to persuade her to come back, but suddenly her body becomes stiff and she finds it hard to speak, as if someone is controlling her. Charlie calls for help from her friends, but everyone is too stunned to move and realize something is wrong. After that, Charlie quickly walks backward until she falls off the roof. Detective Al Rosen investigates the incident. Michal feels guilty for not being able to save Charlie, especially since Charlie's eyes looked wide open, like her father's eyes before he killed her mother. She runs home and locks herself in her dorm room, mourning Charlie's death. While she is grieving, Michal hears someone knocking on her window. It turned out that several crows were hitting the window, almost breaking it. Michal screamed in fear, hoping the birds would stop. Meanwhile, Danny and his friends were also devastated by Charlie's death. Glenn told Danny to check on Michal because she had been unreachable since the incident. So Danny knocked on Michal's door, but Michal didn't respond, so Danny fell asleep in front of her room. In the middle of the night, Danny woke up and heard the door open. Michal wasn't in her room, so Danny thought she had gone out through the emergency exit. Sure enough, he saw the roof door open. Danny rushed to the roof, fearing Mikal had gone there. When he arrived, Mikal was standing on the edge, ready to jump off the roof. Danny quickly caught her, waking Mikal from her sleepwalking. After that, Mikal showed Danny the videos of her sleepwalking from Charlie's laptop. Mikal told Danny that sleepwalking was a response to her childhood trauma. The 3 lines she drew had started when she was a child, hiding in a closet, and she didn't even remember it at all. The next day, Charlie's mother visited the dormitory. She hoped Mikal would attend Charlie's funeral and receive her belongings, including her phone. The phone rang, and the caller said she wanted to speak with Mikal, claiming Charlie had asked them to meet. Later that day, Danny and Mikal took Glenn and Joe to the psychic. Though reluctant and skeptical, the 4 of them went to the psychic's house, which Charlie had visited before the rooftop gathering. The psychic was named Ruby. Ruby stated that dark energy was surrounding Mikal, caused by bad memories. At that moment, Joe, Glenn, Danny, and Ruby gathered around the table to explain why they were there, while Mikal waited outside the room. A few minutes later, Ruby invited Mikal to join them. She then gave each of them a different natural stone before beginning the energy cleansing ritual on Mikal's body. Ruby explained that the energy could have been passed down from Mikal's father and spread to those closest to her, such as her mother and Charlie. Ruby then asked Mikal's mother's name, after which she called out Patricia, Mikal's mother's name, using a spell. Shortly afterward, Ruby jerked as if possessed, holding a pen and paper that automatically began writing something. When Ruby came to her senses, she read the paper in horror and threw it away. However, Mikal forced Ruby to show her what was written. Ruby then revealed the contents of the paper, which read, "I killed Charlie." Mikal became furious because the message made no sense at all. She shouted at Ruby and demanded to know who had spoken to her earlier. Ruby was possessed again and wrote, "I am Mikal." Mikal suddenly had a panic attack and ran outside. Danny helped her sit in the car. After that, Danny invited Glenn and Joe to talk. According to Danny, they had to investigate everything until it was clear, even though they didn't believe Ruby. In short, Danny took Mikal to bed. While Joe and Glenn looked into Mikal's past online, they found an article stating that Mikal had been locked in a cage by her parents when she was a child. Joe said that her unusual behavior was related to their belief in a book called The Cult of Dolos. Suddenly, Mikal appeared. It turned out that she was sleepwalking again. Seeing this, Danny told Joe and Glenn to follow her. Mikal wrote something on the window and repeated the words like a spell. Danny woke Mikal up, and she came to her senses. Mikal said that she dreamed of Charlie and heard her. Danny calmed Mikal down, then took her to a cafe to drink coffee so that Mikal could calm down and feel free to talk. Mikal recalled how her foster parents treated her. Mikal's foster father liked young girls like Mikal. Mikal hated her foster father's actions, especially since her foster father was found dead by suicide with the word "sorry" written on his stomach. Since then, Mikal feared that her emotions were being consumed by death, which caused those around her to die. For example, before Charlie died, Mikal felt extremely angry because her secret had been revealed. Mikal is deeply worried that she is the one who moved Charlie's body and caused her to commit suicide, just like her foster father. Mikal tries to forget what happened to her biological father, but it is still very difficult. Mikal also shares that Charlie promised to accompany her to meet her biological father. Since Charlie is no longer here, Danny offers to help take her there. Meanwhile, Joe returns to Ruby's house alone to borrow the book The Cult of Dolos. Ruby had warned her not to let Mikal read it. Joe sends a message to Glenn and Danny to let them know she has the book and invites them to meet up, but neither Glenn nor Danny responds immediately. Danny took Mikal first, and while waiting, Joe went to the campus library. She was tempted to read the book first. According to the book, the ritual of summoning Dolos united light and darkness, then brought Dolos back to the world, and anyone who opposed it would have their desires turned against them. Reading the last words, Joe became nervous and lit a cigarette. She then called Ruby, but before she could finish speaking, Joe suddenly couldn't move or open her mouth. She tried to ask Ruby for help with her mouth closed, but her efforts were in vain. The cigarette fell onto the book, and Joe died a gruesome death beyond her control. The same thing happened to Glenn, who was working out at the gym. He couldn't control himself as he loaded weights onto the barbell until his body couldn't take it anymore. Like Joe, Glenn also died in a very horrific way. Meanwhile, Danny and Mikal had arrived at the prison where David was being held. Mikal felt extremely nervous about seeing her father after so long, but she mustered the courage to start the conversation. David didn't expect to see Mikal again. He asked why Mikal just came to visit him now, but Mikal instead asked why David had killed Patricia. At that moment, David replied that it wasn't his will, but Mikal's. David then recalled what the three of them had done in a ritual from the past. Mikal was certain it wasn't her who had guided David, but David firmly denied it. David explained that they had summoned Dolos by mixing David and Patricia's sinful blood with Mikal's pure blood. Since then, Mikal could control others' wills by sensing their negative emotions. David said that on the night of the murder, he heard Mikal's voice in his head, and Dolos absorbed Mikal's hatred and used it. Dolos did not want to be reborn through Patricia, but chose Mikal instead. David realized that Mikal also knew this and was exploiting what Dolos had granted her. David was certain that Mikal was a monster. He had hoped to die after killing Patricia, but Mikal would not allow it. David believed Mikal wanted him to suffer and be imprisoned, just as she had been as a child. The conversation left Mikal shocked and devastated. She confessed she regretted meeting her father. She and Danny then returned home. On the way, Danny's hand suddenly stiffened, but only for a moment. Danny's phone also rang. It was Detective Al, informing them of their friends' deaths and wanting to speak with Danny and Mikal at the police station. Al said Joe had tried to call Danny multiple times before she died, and CCTV cameras had seen them all leave together a few hours earlier. Al couldn't understand how three friends could die one after another. Danny replied that he had taken Mikal to visit her father in prison. Danny felt offended by Al's statement, which seemed to implicate him and Mikal in the deaths. Danny was certain it was just an accident. Al showed 3 photos with the same message, "I'm sorry," written on the bodies of 3 different people: Mikal's foster father, Joe, and Glenn. Without hesitation, Al asked if Mikal had written it. Mikal firmly replied that another disaster would occur if Al kept her at the station. According to her, she and Danny hadn't done anything and were entitled to leave. Mikal got up and left without asking Danny to come with her, saying that Danny would be safe from her here. Danny tried to chase after her, but Mikal locked Danny inside with Al, who sat frozen, unable to move, claiming that Mikal had told him to stay where he was. However, after a while, Danny managed to escape from the police station. While Mikal went to find a place to be alone, intending to end her life, she chose a bridge over a fast-flowing river. Danny, who found her, saw Mikal jump, but a few seconds later she was thrown back. Mikal said it wouldn't let her die. Danny felt he had to do something. He took Mikal to Ruby's house. Now Danny believed whatever caused Charlie to appear was real. In the car, Danny tried to talk to Mikal, but Mikal remained silent and did not want to be touched. Ruby knew what had happened to Mikal and asked Danny to leave her alone. However, Mikal came to her senses after hearing Ruby and Danny talk. Mikal told Ruby that the creature was angry with her because she knew about Dolos inside her. The creature also made Mikal kill her friends who knew about the strange thing in her. Here, Mikal admits that Dolos just wants to be left alone. Ruby finally apologizes for triggering all of this, saying she planted the idea in Charlie's mind that there was something dark in Mikal. Charlie then made Mikal believe there was something wrong with her, while what Mikal's father admitted was just nonsense. Ruby felt guilty for deceiving them. She then gave something to Danny while signaling that what she had said earlier was a lie so that Mikal wouldn't suspect anything. They left Ruby's house, and as soon as they were gone, Ruby called Detective Al. In the car, Mikal was suspicious of where Danny was taking her. Using her mind, Mikal forced Danny to break. She then forced Danny to admit what Ruby had given him earlier, but Danny refused to answer honestly, so Mikal abused him without touching him. Unable to resist, Danny handed over the money Ruby had given him. It turned out Ruby had written several messages for Danny, asking her to read them alone, keep Mikal away from others. Ruby would contact him later and make sure Mikal didn't find out he had read this. After all the messages were read, Mikal slammed Danny's head against the steering wheel until he was badly injured, and Mikal couldn't stop herself. Mikal finally begged Dolos to leave her and Danny alone, but Dolos refused and continued to torture Danny to death. Mikal decided to turn herself into the police station. She confessed that she had killed several people, then yelled at the police officer who took her report to shoot her on the spot. The police initially refused and asked Mikal to wait for his colleague to respond, but Mikal's shouts grew louder until the officer was startled and aimed his gun. Unfortunately, when Mikal thought she would succeed, Dolos took control of her mind and made the officer aim the gun at himself, so that in a matter of seconds, the officer was dead. The gunshot drew other police officers to the scene, who ordered Mikal to surrender. At this point, Mikal begged them all to shoot her. But once again, after Mikal shouted at them, the police officers attacked each other instead. While Mikal was in shock from the chaos around her, Al suddenly arrived and fired a tranquilizer dart from behind, then took Mikal to Ruby's house. Ruby asked Al not to judge her even though she had killed many people. Ruby then explained about the power of Dolos within Mikal. Although Al found it difficult to believe at first, Ruby showed him several texts about satanic rituals and extraordinary events that originated from mystical beliefs. Ruby said they must immediately transfer Dolos to a new host, but Ruby failed to find a suitable candidate. She eventually decided to ask Mikal's subconscious to write down what they should do. Mikal replied that Dolos wouldn't leave her as long as David was still alive. For that reason, Ruby asked Al to arrange a way for Dolos to transfer to David. The next day, Ruby brought Mikal to the prison. After some persuasion, David finally agreed, and the lethal injection was carried out. This method successfully transferred Dolos for a moment, until David slowly lost his life. However, Mikal smiled meaningfully, indicating that Dolos was still there.